All right, we'll get going then. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Q&A for Wicked Queer's 2022 Experimental Film Shorts program. My name is Cole Wilder and I'm one of the programmers of this festival. And I'm very excited to be joined by these amazing filmmakers from this program. If you're watching this Q&A and have not watched the shorts yet, I would strongly recommend going and doing so because obviously they are well worth watching. If you want to watch those, you can find them at our sort of channel at zerb.tv/Wicked Queer Film Festival. And more information as well can be found on our website, wickedqueer.org. So yeah, I guess we'll just start by having everyone go around, introduce themselves, name, pronouns, and then just what film you made. And if you want to, just a short, like very brief description of the film. I guess we'll start with Devin.
Yeah, this is what I get for showing up first. I'm Devin Utah. I use they, he pronouns. The film that I submitted is The Abandoned Swimming Pool, and my co-director is Frankie Simons. She is at work today and can't be here. But you all know and love her, and she's currently living in Salem, Massachusetts. So I did travel up there actually to make the film. And it's a bit of sort of like a twisted homage sort of to Luther Price. It was sort of Frankie's idea. He was her mentor at some point, and after he passed, she sort of approached me with this concept, and I was totally in and ran with it.
Cool. We'll do Grace next.
I'm Grace Whitfield, and I'm she, her. And I'm the writer-director of We Two, which is a short film on Super 8 about two lovers saying goodbye to each other, and it's kind of their memory and internal dialogue that we see throughout. So yeah, that's it.
Cool. And Gina?
Oh, hi, I'm Gina Kamensky. I'm an experimental animator in Somerville, Massachusetts. And I did Sed Sepe Cadendo, which is, so basically I was at a artist residency in Vermont, and it was beautiful spring, June. I took my clothes off and I did pixelation, where I did kind of a dance piece around the gardens, using stop motion, but using my body as a subject matter.
Cool. And Ray?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Ray Rea, and I go by he, him pronouns, and I made, shot, edited, Put the Brights On, which is a shot on 16mm and Super 8 short about rural transgender subjects. So, and it has as subjects both people on the female to male spectrum, which I'm on, the male to female spectrum, and also gender non-binary subjects who choose to live in rural areas. And it was shot here in greater Minnesota, but I think, there's so much going on in this country about rural urban divide that I'm trying to touch on.
Cool. And Caleb?
Caleb, they, he, I think mine is from sort of like both found in original footage, but I was thinking about, as many people were thinking about connections between the beginning of the AIDS crisis and COVID, and connecting up some of those histories together, and thinking about Larry Kramer, when he died, was working on a play that was sort of thinking about those two time periods together, and that never finished. And I was imagining like I don't know, what was his play about, or what are some of those things? And I stumbled upon an old keynote of his at Pride from '91, and was thinking about how much that he was saying was directly applicable to this present moment. It didn't feel like anything had changed. And so it was sort of like combining those pieces now and then, and sort of letting us think about what's changed or maybe what hasn't.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And Whiskey?
I am Whiskey Chow. I'm a visual artist coming from a performance art background. So so my film is kind of in combination of filmed performance and CGI animation. And the CGI animation is the 3D scan of my body when I was wearing a silicone muscle suit. And then the whole film is kind of creating a queer fantasy giant queer body land to welcome the marginalized being to come to live on, trying to create this kind of healing space, and also referencing to the love and care in the Asian context, which is cooking. So you can see some kind of Chinese cooking spices growing from the body land. Yeah, so that's my film.
Cool. Awesome. So the first question that I sort of want to lead with, which maybe is something that everyone would like to not think about, just really relating back to the last couple of years with COVID. I know this likely has changed a lot of the ways that people have made films. It's a little bit different with experimental films sometimes, but as we all know, film is sort of inherently a collaborative medium. So I just sort of wanted to ask how the last 2 years and sort of like the sort of social isolation, which has let up here and there supposedly through the last like year and a half, how all of that has sort of affected your process, if it has changed it at all. Or I guess sort of like comparing how you were making work pre-COVID to sort of not post-COVID, but during COVID. Yeah, the long-winded way of saying that, but how has COVID changed your filmmaking practice? And anyone can just jump in as they want.
Well, for me, I've become an editor. So quite drastically changed in that before I would have gone to my editor's house and we'd sat down together and worked on things. But with this short, because we went straight into lockdown and I hadn't really grasped the whole Zoom working together concept at that point. So I just went ahead and edited it myself. So it's drastically changed my process for sure in that respect. Yeah, not to say I wouldn't work alongside editors again, of course, I'm sure I will. But yeah, it's been really interesting in that respect, for me anyway.
It hasn't changed my process at all. I've always worked alone. I don't play well with others, so it was great. I got to teach at home, so I didn't have to do any commuting, which actually gave me extra time. So I made 3 films instead of 2. So it was in a more serious note. It allowed me a time to focus, and kind of it was. I hate to say therapeutic, but it was really good to focus. It just I'm in my studio. I've got all my equipment, and I'm making films. So I guess that was a productive time.
Yeah,
Right.
I had. Oh, go ahead, Whiskey.
No, you've been waiting.
I was just going to say, so Put the Brights On was pretty much completely derailed by COVID. I also teach, so I had recorded all the interviews in the film, and I was planning on shooting all the videos over what would have been my spring break in March of 2020. And then everything shifted, so I ended up first, it was grant funded, so I had to finish it by July. So I finished it as a radio piece, as just audio only, with a soundscape created by a collaborator, a friend of mine, Helena Thompson. And then in the summer and fall, and that's when I ended up shooting 16 and Super 8. But, honestly, to my mind, it was probably the best, not that COVID was the best thing, but the change in the film was so much better for it. It ended up being that there was this real separation between image and audio that I really actually like. It's some kind of a conversation. So.
For me, I think as a performance artist who lose the space and live audience during the COVID, it's kind of like changing my way to relate it to digital, I think. And also as a migrant artist in the UK, I have that kind of anger to create something. So the film is a final outcome of a digital workshop where I invite the marginalized participant to use the Zoom as a safe space to process the trauma or their relationship with their body. And then also I think in the process of making the film, if you watch the film, you can see there's a lot of like glitch going on. And that kind of digital material is not like, oh, we want a perfect body. We are playing with the kind of fluidity, which for me, that is the digital freedom for me to play with this kind of queerness. And this has gone beyond from what I can do in a live performance.
Totally.
Yeah, I was gonna say similarly, like the way that I make things, since I make all sorts of things, not just film. I'm usually like looking for things in the out in the world and then responding to them as I find them, like physical objects. And here, like having to like dig through a sort of digital trail. I'm getting a wild echo. But having to sort of like find things online when I can't go to the places I'm used to finding things in the like physical world, sort of like created a different different materials. And then the sort of limitations, there aren't those sort of like physical limitations of like what things can be glued to other things, because we're sort of like working with different pieces. So I mean, I respond a little bit to like what you're saying.
I really resonated with what you said, Whiskey, about the digital, the different relationship to the digital, because I think there's a hesitancy to like give in to the virtual screenings. And I talk a lot with my friends who are filmmakers about missing the audience, and like why even bother to host a conversation if it's not going to be possible with a live audience, especially for queer and trans cinema. So it's kind of been my like COVID, my like boomer holdout, where I'm like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't give into this. Maybe this is an essential part of like talking about queer cinema. It has to happen in person with the audience. And then I ended up traveling a lot because it was not safe to ask people to meet me on public transit. So I drove to Salem like every other weekend for about a year from New York. And that became significant.
Cool. And I guess some of us sort of touched on this already, but I think aside from sort of like subject matter in a lot of these films, I sort of want to pose the question of like how queerness as the way that you personally conceive of it influences your work. Just because I think, especially with experimental film, like queerness and experimental film both have this sort of like inherent quality to them of like pushing boundaries and sort of like figuring out other ways of sort of like being, seeing, creating in many different ways. So I know some of you sort of touched on this already, but if anyone else has any input on sort of that aspect of their process, I'd be very interested to hear about that.
I'm very interested in like in queerness as maybe not even collage, but like assemblage, as like sort of like making like taking from things that weren't made from us and recontextualizing them, recombining them, like when there aren't words, when there aren't visuals, when there aren't things that sort of reflect the way that we feel and the way that we are. It's about like taking from what already exists and sort of creating something new. And so that's the way I approach everything I make, is like taking from something else, and how do I sort of create new meaning from its combination? So I think that process is really important to me.
I think for me is I think it's the queer gaze. It's about the communication of the queer gaze and the queer time. This is like reflecting on the editing process, and also I think we like when we talk about queerness, we talk about can be like personal experience, intimate experience, or a identity. And I think as a performance artist, the body for me, because my identity is deeply rooted on the body. So it means when the body being digitalized, you look like it's looking like just a glitch, just a bunch of stuff, but I still see it as my body. So this kind of digital material is kind of allowing me to play and to express more and push the boundary, because the film is quite transgressive. Like after my friend watched the film, and then they said, "Oh, maybe whiskey is datum," and then I'm quite happy with she her, because I want to confuse the definition. But that is how the film can do, and also talking about the queer time. Because you can kind of like slowing down or kind of making it timeless. So in the filmmaking process, at least for me, I think it's quite empowering. And then I feel like I'm the god. I can just like move the camera in the slowest way, and to allow the audience to look at the body, to look at the material, to experience the time without rushing.
Cool.
One thing I think that isn't brought up a lot is aging. And you know, this film, the film I did was really a celebration. I'm 62 and I transitioned decades ago, and feeling like really, really grounded, you know, as a woman, just feeling very grounded in my body, like my feet very much on the earth. And also someone who does weight training and just feeling really good physically. Like I have a tendency to want to throw myself around, you know, like kind of like a rag doll. So I think actually, you know, as far as my own identity, it's this kind of deeply personal feeling of being at home and wanting to celebrate that by moving and kind of slapstick and, you know, having some fun with that. But I think a lot of what I'm doing really comes from the physicality of, you know, I think aging again has a lot to do with it. Spending this many decades in what I have here. Anyhow, yeah.
Well, Gina, I can certainly relate to all of that. I also transitioned decades ago, so and also feel very grounded. I'm around your age, so you know, it's not for me though. Part of what I think is my queer practice in filmmaking is continuing to be disruptive, you know, and disruptive both in subject matter and also in form as well, you know. So a lot of what I ended up trying to do with Put the Brights On was just outright myth busting, you know, and doing that as much with form and actual, you know, getting my hands on 16mm, working against stereotype of, specifically against stereotype that urban people have about rural people. There's just so much cutesiness and folksiness that goes on about rural people coming from people living in the city. So I felt like, really screening different story in a different form and disrupting what people expected to see, disrupting people's expectations. And also, formally, there's quite a lot of found footage and footage from the Prelinger archives in San Francisco incorporated into the film. So, it's really bouncing away from, I always end up on some border of nonfiction and experimental. And I just really reject the idea that nonfiction film has to be quote unquote educational. I think the best nonfiction that I've seen comes from such a different channel than the desire to educate, and really speaks to what is real. How do we get at what is real? Can we even get at what is real? And to my mind, queerness has a lot to do with that, because I think, certainly in my own lifetime and in the queer culture, I think people really examine that question in a way that it's often taken for granted in mainstream society, that there is some kind of codified realness that we should all be aspiring to. And so I also reject that, everybody has their own realness. And so I could go on, but I don't want to take up too much time.
I've found some similar, I found a lot of my transness in the cutting of 16 millimeter. Frankie and I shot a few rolls, but there's also some found footage, and we felt pretty strongly at the time, I'm not sure why now, about putting it together by hand with a splicer and doing no digital cutting to the picture. But then when we got it in, digitally, I ended up doing a lot of the audio, like it was so layered. There was this disconnect for me, like we wanted to be so pristine with not touching the 16 scan digitally, no filters, no cuts. So you could see the splices and you can see some of our mistakes because we couldn't really watch it back very easily. It was like a broken projector. It was hilarious. It was a hilarious work process, honestly. So to see it now, I'm really glad I stuck to that because it feels so much more embodied to me. The timing is so different than if I had cut it in Premiere. But at the same time, now I'm working backwards with the audio. It reminds me of how I've related to my own body and my own transsexuality with like picking and choosing what I want visually and endearing my, getting there and then owning it. So I'm like, whatever, I've done the audio, the audio doesn't necessarily match in format, but we're going to make it match and I'm going to get the best of both worlds. And I'm happy with the result. I'm very excited to keep working on 16 for this reason. And like, I've processed my own film. That's really how I prefer to work. I don't know if COVID really took away my access to that kind of thing, but I'm really into the chemicals and just making it look disgusting. So that's kind of where I'm going, but the price of film just went up. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that film processing happens. It's harder every year and every year. Yeah, do you have anything to add, Grace? Or
it's just really, really lovely hearing everyone speak. It's really interesting, and I really want to watch everyone's films now. So yeah, and that was so interesting. I mean, it's very interesting what everyone's saying, but particularly Ray, what you were saying about non-fiction and the realness. I find that kind of really fascinating. The play, and then what you were saying about the 16 millimeter and splicing it, and how, I mean, I haven't made a non-fiction piece, but you've inspired me to think about doing that. So yeah, that's my adding to that conversation.
cool. Well, that's Vera talking. yeah, I think sort of one of the last questions, aside from just sort of some wrap up stuff, is asking sort of which filmmakers sort of inspire your work, or if you have any filmmaker or just artists in general that sort of have influenced you, the way that you sort of approach your artistic practice. If you want to give anyone shout outs, either contemporaries or the greats, I should say, I guess. But yeah, if you have anyone you want to sort of talk about and how that influences you, go for it.
I have a few that sort of got me to where I'm at, and they're not strictly filmmakers, but there's this performance artist who's a trans guy, Gio Wyeth. He's from New York, and he's an amazing musician. Like it's just unbelievable, very multimedia and very different. It's like, I don't know, you just have to see it. And relatedly, a lot of these people are in the Netherlands right now, is Eliza Steinbach's book, Shimmering Images, which is about, I don't know, has anybody read it? It's about, to me, specifically 16mm, but cinema being an inherently queer and trans medium, and how transsexual bodies, they shimmer, they look different in different lights, and how this is also, a facet of film. And, it's like a whole thesis book on that. I've only gotten about halfway through it, but it's really fantastic.
For me, I'm quite influenced, well, for this short specifically, photography mainly, like Bill Brandt, Tina Modotti. Yeah, it was quite a few stills that were the starting block for me, is in what I wanted to make, and that's where the idea kind of originated from. But yeah, I'm really interested in sort of there's an image of their bodies, their legs being intertwined, and how you can have these kind of abstract moments, and they can say a lot in a very short amount of time. And then obviously people like Maya Deren, of course, I'm sure she's influenced me plenty in her surrealism. Yeah, I mean, I'm very much inspired, yeah, by photography, by music, by people talking on the street. It comes from everywhere, really, for me.
Cool. Anyone else have?
Yeah, I really like, Devin, what you said about shimmering. That's great. I used to teach Studio Foundation. I would talk about ambiguous visual figures, and I, like the typical like perspective illusions that when you just blinked your eyes, it would invert. I could draw it, but I'm not going to draw it. But I thought, yeah, that's exactly how it feels like when we walk down the street, and if I kind of saw someone who was ambiguous, or someone who's trans, they would kind of flicker, and I love that. As an animator, that really resonates, because you can interlace frames, and you're always going to get one artist I've always loved is Robert Breer, and he always uses this technique where he'd be running two different images every other frame, and you get that kind of ambiguous, like it's there, it's not there. So yeah.
Yeah, I was in the middle of writing my MFA thesis when this book came out, and it was like she had written my thesis before I could get to it, and I was like, well, I'll just be grateful. But I just find it so beautiful, the like precious reframing of a trans body that's like also very rooted in academia. It just feels like really good ammo. Yeah.
So I'm really inspired by a couple of friends who are doing things that are actually pretty different than what I do, but some of what you've been doing, Devin, with the material and hand processing work. And one of my closest friends in San Francisco is Greta Snyder, and she often works with the flat out material and teaches a material film course. but also has made experimental nonfiction for years and years. And, you know, she made a beautiful film called Flight that was about her father after he passed away, where she actually took artifacts from her father and in a dark room laid them over the film and then flashed the film repeatedly over and over again. So she did that. She made a film called Portland that was about jumping trains going to Portland. She comes out of like the sort of earlier punk community on the West Coast, which I was also in a long time ago. So, and her sensibility is very much there. So so I really appreciate Greta, and you know, also have just been following along with places like the Echo Park Film Center in Los Angeles, and you know, just all of these places that are just feeding into hand processing and the whole Cavanagh system. So, you know, I'm just looking down the road. Eventually, that's in my future, although I don't think it's the only thing in my future, but I'm really curious about getting more into that.
I I think the filmmaker who influenced me a lot is Andrew Thomas Huang. Actually, he's in the U.S. And then I have a like artist curatorial program, and then I feature his film because he's engaging with the same Chinese myths as I did, but I did a performance, and then so we become friends. And then his way of engaging with the Chinese cultural heritage like always inspire me. So I actually hide some Chinese myth reference in my film. One of it, which is the most obvious, is the lotus root. So it's basically coming from a story, a character in the Chinese myth called Ne Zha, and then they basically really rebellion, and they are very naughty, and they stay in their mother's body for 3 years and a half, and then come out from the body, and then come out as a huge meatball. And then their father was like, this must be devil. I must kill this. And then so the meatball just broke and come out as a kid, not a baby. And then so when they slightly grow up, they went to the seaside and then accidentally killed the son of the Dragon King. And then when they go back home and then told their father was like, if I don't kill you now, the Dragon King will just come to me. And then so at that time they commit a suicide, saying, now I just clear the debt of my birth. I carve up my flesh and return to my mother. My bone return to the father. And then later, because their soul is still there, so their master used the lotus root to create a body for them, so the soul can come back and have a new place to rest. And this for me is the queer body, because it's not going through any kind of biological process, and that is like the master is like their chosen family. Like most of the time your original family just hate you. And then so that is like I hide the story in my film. I didn't retell it, but that is where it's coming from. How to materialize the queer body. So this is I think that is the inspiration from Andrew Thomas Huang. And another artist who is a visual artist and performance artist. I mean, they also do sculpture and video and things based in Los Angeles, Castles. I see Castles' work before I become an artist. And their stillness in the work is kind of, I feel, echoing with that. I think that is because the relationship with queer masculinity. And yeah, and then later we become friends as well. So I think I'm glad those people are out there. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Does anyone else have anything else to add? No. Okay. Well, yeah, I think we'll start to wrap things up. I guess if anyone has any projects that are in the works that they want to sort of give shout outs to, or just plug their websites or social media or anything, we can go through and do that if people want. If people want to. Yeah, if you have anything to plug, just go for it.
I want to plug Frankie's Vimeo. Frankie Simons on Vimeo is really fun.
Cool. Cool.
I just making a small wish, as I never been to US, I never been to Boston. My film travel for me. So I hope like in the near future I can like physically be there, and then like see all of you and engage with the audience and do stuff.
Yeah.
But thank you for having this like amazing like digital screening and this kind of conversation. I mean, we all coming from different background and having different kind of life experience. But it's lucky that we can share this together and then find a lot of things with like resonance. So thank you.
I had one shout out. I just came back from Ann Arbor Film Festival, and I was on the jury, and it was great. I mean, I haven't been in a festival in 2 years, and I just suddenly realized why being in person. But I saw this film in the queer shorts called Tank Fairy. I think it's the director from Taiwan. I can't remember the director's name. It was a blast. It was about this kind of drag queen who delivers propane, and this kid who's like really queer, this little kid, and it's like a musical. It's an action film. It has everything you could possibly want in a queer film. It was just the best. So I can't remember the director's name, but I could get my reader. But anyhow, look up Tank Fairy. It's a great film.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've been thinking about making something about queer bodies that actually comes from an angle about ability, disability, what's considered disability, what's ability, because I've, dealt with spinal issues since I was 10. So, and they've really come to a head recently, and I'm just interested in body modification and trans body modification as opposed to medical body modification. So that's just like something, if I do it, it will be experimental. It's not going to be traditional documentary. So
cool. Well, yeah, so for anyone watching, thank you for tuning in. This experimental shorts program, as well as a lot of other ones, will be available on our channel at zerb.tv/Wicked Queer Film Festival. Most things will be online streaming until April 30th. Some things are sort of at a shorter time period if they are being shown in person. But yeah, I highly encourage everyone to check out the full program. There's some pretty amazing stuff in there. And if you want any more information, you can go to our website at wickedqueer.org. Thank you.